Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Exceptional Conservative Show live on TECN TV. I want you to know before we bring Lieutenant Colonel Sargis Sangari back on that this is my personal commentary, and I will await his answer here. The NATO weekend or the NATO week has to be the last in which the president is returning from, had to be the most politically disgusting display of world leaders, although it was successful for the president. And what I mean by that is this is just one example. I'm going to play it for you. It's from The Guardian. But there were a number of mishaps and missteps by other world leaders in an instance to try to defame the character of our president.
I heard that President Macron said NATO is brain dead. I think that's very insulting to a lot of different forces.
I know that my statements created some reactions and shake a little bit. A lot of people. I do stand by. We don't have the same definition of terrorism around the table. When I look at Turkey, they now are fighting against those who fight with us, who fought with us, shoulder to shoulder against ISIS. And sometimes they work with ISIS process. This is an issue, and this is a strategic issue. If we just have discussion about what we pay, and we don't have clear discussions about such a situation, we are not serious. We are not serious for our soldiers, we are not serious for our people. This is the very reason of my statements. I do believe we need strategic clarifications.
Gotta ask you, Lieutenant Colonel, you have great wisdom in this area. First and foremost, is NATO brain dead?
NATO is not brain dead. NATO is not focused where it needs to be focused. And it's not focused because a lot of the member states just are all over the map when it comes to how they're looking at the benefit and interest. Like when we put sanctions against Iran, the three major nations that violated those sanctions were France, Britain, and Germany. Okay. When we took out Abu Sayyaf, our Delta forces did when ISIS was still on the ground in Syria, we realized that there was a lot of ISIS oil that was moving through the hands of the Sunni Muslim Kurds in northern Syria into the Kurdish regional government, which is in northern Iraq. It was moving into Turkey, and it was being sold to various different European countries. France was one of the major countries that was importing that oil. Now, Turkey had an opportunity of mixing it with other types of oil, because really the Syria oil is not that good at the level of quality that international community would pay a high amount on. That's why they were able to buy for $1, sell for $20 a barrel. But now, even after ISIS was defeated, we realized that oil was still moving. But this time it wasn't going into Turkey, it was going down south. France still has a lot of those oil barrels that end up in France. So obviously, the leader of France back on the Kurds that are the main control of the oil that comes to his country. With that said, though, the problem we run into in the region is that the Chinese have tried to expand into Syria, into the Middle East. They just struck a new deal that's looking at basically maybe 500 billion barrel. Not barrel, but $500 billion worth of U.S. dollars worth of natural gas to Russia. So that means that the Shanghai Corporation that we were so much fearful about a long time ago, it's on the move. This is the type of a monstrosity we have to be careful of. To include China expanding its for development in Syria, bypass the sanctions we have put against them through the quotas with our fight at the international level. Adding to this fight is the fact that the same Kurds that the French are protecting and saying that in this case Turkey is going after them in northern Syria are the same individuals that just today had returned from meeting with UAE and Saudi officials in UAE. And these are the Kurdish leadership in northern Iraq. And upon their return, there's possibility that three fully loaded aircrafts came into northern Iraq with crossing Iraq weapons and systems that there's three ways that those weapon systems are being used. Either the Kurds in northern Iraq are going to again use it to weaken the Iraqi government, which is in disarray right now, where people are being killed in the streets in Baghdad, or they're going to turn around and give those weapons to the Kurds in northern Iran, which is to stabilize northern Iran in order for Iran, in this case, to retaliate against them, or turn them over to the Kurds in Syria, which is going to force the hand of Turkey to get into Syria again. In this case, forcing our hand under the current POTUS to take the steps that we weren't trying to take against a NATO ally. Now, if France knows that, then France needs to pick up the phone, call its Kurdish, Sunni Muslim Kurdish friends in northern Iraq and say, do not give those weapon systems to the Kurds in Syria.
But it doesn't.
Then you can afford
but it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the Macron narrative. Macron and German's prime minister want a failure on behalf of Donald Trump in Syria. They want to say that Syria was his bloody hands. It's his loss. Am I right about that?
Well, what they want to do is, one, make the president look bad. Secondly, force the hand of Turkey to attack wider into northern Syria, where Turkey is holding into ground right now. Keep in mind one thing that is also has happened here, and this is why the current POTUS is under so much press. Not just because impeachment hearings are taking place while he's overseas, which is really undercutting his credibility. At the end of the day, there's two things that are going to happen. Either the impeachment process will go through and go from the Senate, he'll be impeached, or he won't be impeached. Regardless, you weakened him on the international scale. And Adam Schiff recently introduced a House resolution 296 where the Turks were named for, and it is rightfully so that they're the ones who conducted the first genocide of the 20th century. But Adam Schiff picked up the leadership of that House resolution, made it a non-binding, non-concurrent, simple resolution, forcing it not to even make it into the Senate. And he did it why? Because the president sent the vice president and the secretary of state to discuss the terms of Turkey's involvement in northern Syria. And once the president said, I will ensure that Congress does not take any steps against you for sanctions, what does Adam Schiff do in the Democrats? They introduce this House resolution. It's meaningless, seriously, for the Armenians, although they think it's worth something. It's a non-binding, simple House resolution. That means it's what the paper is written on. But it is on the political standing, forcing the hands of others, in this case the Senate, to not be able to take a stand against Erdogan when he initially came here for the meetings recently in D.C., pitting the Republicans, Democrats against each other, taking different stands, just so Adam Schiff can strengthen his ability, because he has a large Armenian community in this district, to say, look, I tried, go vote for me for this election.
Well,
in
Adam
this
Schiff
process, all these maturations are tied together because all these people talk to each other.
Yeah.
And what you have done is basically put the United States in a weak position as a Shanghai Cooperation Organization and expanding in the region, forcing the Turks to be closer to the Russians by S-400s from them, which means that now they have to be closer to Iran. And if the Russians, a NATO ally, is receiving S-400s from the Russians, imagine what the Iran are receiving in this process, as our southern, supposedly our allies in the region, are Sunni Muslim Kurds to to make President look bad in order to be able to push their case to say, look, um, the president abandoned his courage. All these things are tied together. And unfortunately, the POTUS is doing its best to fight against all these machinations.
It was a great thing, Lieutenant Colonel, that you came on the air with us in the week that President Trump was making his decision as commander in chief to take our forces away from the borders and explain to the American people, because Fox News wasn't doing it, none of the conservative channels were doing it, and certainly not the leftist channels. You explain that not all Kurds are alike, and Kurds are working in their best self interest at this time period with whomever they can get along with. And they can be terrorists at times. We weren't getting that information from anyone else. We were all getting the criticism that Donald Trump is leaving our ally alone. And follow up to that, there's a question out of the chat roll this particular evening. It's by Dave Milner. Dave Milner is asking exactly. Here's the question. I know you're going to discuss NATO. When the time comes, please ask whether NATO can be compatible with the planned European army. The European Union's putting together an army. Can NATO work with that?
The way it's constructed and the way it's supposed to defend itself, it still falls back into the old model where every member is taking on a lane if that fight's going to take place against Russia. Now, it goes back to the whole means of how we were to raid one battlefield throughout all the NATO nations in Western Europe, now moving forward to other nations that are part of NATO and Eastern Europe. However, that said, it's going to be hard to think that given what the leadership is in those countries, that the commanders on the ground are going to be able to execute the tactical and operational level plans and support the overall NATO mission and mission requirement. Because some leader of France says, I need you to block here, not block there for my interests. Everything falls apart. I just don't see how that structure can be able to fight. Look, if anything, take a look at what's happening. Again, the China Corporation Organization is expanding. It's actually economically choking us. What are we doing? French, British, and the Germans are working against our interests economically. When it comes to pressure, they are now starting to show that they're willing to work against our interests when it comes to foreign policy, even in Syria and other places within the region. The so-called individuals that we have that are supposed to be our allies on the ground, in this case, the Kurds, are bringing possibly weapons in and are trying to destabilize Iraq more. And if Iraq falls apart again, it's on our necks. But what is Washington doing? You have individuals from the Democratic Party pushing these House resolutions that are, again, simple, non-binding, non-conclusive, which it means you might as well have spit in the face of every Armenian or Syrian and Greek who was massacred for 100 years. We try to explain that to some of the Armenian brethren that we have here in the Syrians. And tell them, you work for Adam Schiff to a point, current POTUS. It's very different. It's very different to foreign policy when even in Turkey, people in your own nation are trying to fight against this monstrosity of this coalition that is being built, where the Turks are being pushed closer to the Russians. They're having a close relationship with the Iranians. China is having a closer relationship with Russia when it comes to how much money it's making. And now the effects of those organizations, including China, striking deals economically with the same three major characters in NATO that I just talked about. These are all tied together. Tomorrow I'm going to be flying out to Korea myself because part of it, I believe, is that if we lose focus on getting the Korean discussion moving forward again, because that's on the back burner with everything that's happening in Washington right now, I think that we're going to end up with Southeast Asia sooner than we expected. And everything that the POTUS has last couple of years probably be reversed in a year if
Now,
congressmen worry more about their election rather than U.S. interests overall.
exactly, Lieutenant Colonel, got to ask you, when you joined the military, did they tell you about the chain of command? Did they tell you who was the top dog with everything that was in the military?
If they didn't tell me, the top dog told me. Trust me,
So
I've had some discussions. I've been locked up on the carpet a couple of times, but we had to
ex-
make sure that. And I've done the
exactly.
same to folks that didn't understand that concept sometimes.
So the whole idea is that our Congress doesn't seem to understand in its pursuit of trying to impeach the President of the United States that it is he who is in charge of the military and he who is in charge of foreign policy. Is that a correct understanding, Lieutenant Colonel?
Um, Ken, sad to say, I'll be honest. I've briefed members of Congress on both sides. There's folks who don't even know how the State Department operates. Uh, there was a Republican. He's no longer in Congress. I had to literally send him the State Department chart, and I had to explain in an email, this is how it works. And I had to show him where to go in the State Department chart, where to drop down, and why it's important to have those members in a meeting that they were trying to get me to go to. And I was like, useless. Nothing's going to happen with this. You have a lot of members of Congress who really don't understand how the bureaucracies work. Look, I'll give you a perfect example. Take a look at what happened with this. And I believe it was a previous show that I was on when I explained to you the problem we have in the State Department, where you have political appointees come in and you put them in charge of the bureaucracies. It makes as much sense as can. I bring you in because you help me on my campaign and say, here, go take charge of the 82nd Airborne. We wouldn't do that in the military. The last time we took folks to the and put them in charge of the military was during the Civil War, and they caused thousands of casualties, not hundreds of thousands of Americans to die on the battlefield because they had no concept of what the hell to do. We do this constantly when it comes to our State Department. We take an individual who's helped, a president through his campaign, and that guy gets designated an ambassador. So we stick an ambassador. In this case, the ambassador to the EU, in a position. Scholars that read a lot of things, they know how to write. They don't know how bureaucracies operate. And we tell them you're in charge of this bureaucrats. And the bureaucracies operate based on federal regulations, U.S. codes, function budget 150, authorizations. So when you have these two elements and they don't function well, you could end up having suddenly this so-called ambassador making assumptions that the president wants, and it doesn't jive with the bureaucracy. It causes a friction. You have an individual lieutenant colonel who doesn't understand the difference between what it means to be a soldier and be a statesman, gets out of his chain of command. You have a politician suddenly now because he picks that up, and now we have a whole impeachment process because you have pieces of the system that can't function and they don't know how to function together. So literally, the bureaucrat is trying to do what the bureaucracy is supposed to do. The person who's been appointed doesn't know how the bureaucracy works. It kind of makes an assumption of what the POTUS wants. The POTUS is working with him because this is a system that we have established where this is how you pay back individuals that help you for your campaign. And now you have political leadership sitting in the legislature on both sides trying to debate whether or not a political process, in this case an impeachment, should be applied to this monstrosity that we have created ourselves. It's very easy. You want to have a much better working system. Put foreign service officers in charge of foreign service officers. But then, what are you going to do with the people who help you with your campaign?
Yeah, exactly. No spot. No spot whatsoever.
God forbid they do it just because they love it. At the end they have to get a job. They have no concept of how to manage that particular bureaucracy.
Exactly. The wisdom that you have is missing from Congress. It really is. We have a lot of congressmen, senators that may come on and they'll talk about the issues, but there is a deep intrinsic knowledge base, foundational principle that's missing in terms of how to make our country work. How can people support? Because I'm going to have you come back in a few weeks and I want you to talk about some of the other issues in terms of immigration, taxes, and things of that nature. Whew, taxes, Illinois. Um, but um, how can people support your campaign and get this wealth of information and knowledge base back into Washington, D.C.?
And the best way to do it is stop just turning over your vote, the only means by which you have power, to somebody who's just been sitting there as an incumbent. Just stop doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's your vote. Use it for the right reasons. Last time I was running, a gentleman had come in polls, requested a ballot, had gone in and submitted it and left. As he was leaving, the election judge said to him that you haven't selected anybody on the ballot. You didn't punch anybody for your selection. He said, yes, I left it blank. He said, well, why did you request it? Why did you leave it blank? He said, one, I requested because it's my vote. Two, I left it blank because there was nobody on that ballot that deserved my vote. So I exercise my voting power, but you're not gonna take that away from me. But if somebody's not worth it, don't just go in there and just punch them in. The best thing I could ask the people to do that are out there voting, take back your vote. Take it and don't invest them in individuals. Invest them, if you are, in folks that are inherently interested about moving America. And the same old talking points from the time. We are in a complex world, folks. All these pieces are tied together. I cannot unscrew gerrymandering. I cannot unscrew somebody sitting there for 20 years, dictating to me how I should live my life in my district. But what I can do is at least move forward, get into the game, and challenge. We
Yes.
have people in Illinois that there's races nobody's running. Get in and run. It's okay. And look, we need both parties to be functioning. That's the reality. We cannot function in one party. If I've always encouraged my fellow Americans, run, especially the folks that have fought down range, who have seen blood, tasted blood. I drew on some social issues, but that if we're sitting at the table, I know that when you went in there, you went as an American with an American flag on your chest. You
Yeah.
didn't go in there with a donkey or elephant printed on your chest. I can talk to you. We can get this country moving forward for America's interests, not the interests of political parties and individuals. Until we are able to do that, we're not going to win. All I could do in my congressional district is give an option to the voters. At the end of the day, if I don't get selected, at least I can say that I did my piece for my country. I give them. That's all I can.
Well, I'm going to tell
And
you right
hopefully
now,
we can get more gas.
Lieutenant Colonel, it would be a shame if this brilliance is wasted on sitting in your office there in Illinois. You need to be here in Washington, D.C. to change this culture from the inside out. God bless you, sir. And we look forward to encouraging everyone to go tonight to vote Sangari.com, VOTESANGARI.com. Go there, support by every means necessary, financial, spiritual, all other ways. Make certain that we change America from the inside out. Sending him will be the first step. Ladies and gentlemen, want to thank you so much for tuning in and watching tonight. We will be back with more of the best in urban conservative talk. You are watching the Exceptional Conservative Show on TECN TV. We'll be right back. Thank you, sir.
There's only one thing I'm obsessed with. This is making sure that your